about this really interesting paper that we did with Cadent and with brand innovators around the future of CTV. And to start off, I'm going to see if I can. I think I can. I think I can. Yes, looks okay. This slide, which Cadent has kindly put together for us, which lays out some of the big findings from the report. So basically, just to give you a little bit of background, we talked to a bunch of marketers. This was sort of over the summer and into the fall of 2020 about what they thought about CTV and advanced advertising in general, what they felt good about, what they were confused about, and what their plans were for the future. So looking at it, sort of one of the biggest takeaways is that 59% of them were already running ads on CTV. Now I'm going to pull back for a brief second. One of the more interesting things that we find in our TVREV work and was definitely seen in this report is there's a whole lot of confusion around definitions, right? So you hear people talk about OTT and CTV and streaming, and it's like, what does all that mean? And reality is it more or less means the same thing, but when people use different words for it, it gets confusing. We tend to define CTV or connected TV as that subset of OTT which is watched on a television set. So if you look at television programming, that's delivered via streaming, which is sort of all of OTT, probably somewhere between 80 and 90% of it is actually watched on a television set. The rest of it is watched on a phone or a laptop or whatnot. But so it's pretty much all of it. And CTV is just an easier term to use for everyone. But anyway, so what were some of the reasons that they liked advertising on CTV, or that they were attracted to it? And one is wide audience reach, which in 2020 was getting wider, and in 2021 and beyond, it's going to get wider still. Like, we really believe that right now, with the launch of Paramount Plus last week, you've got 9 of these giant flixes, right? These giant multi-billion-dollar streaming services. Plus, you have all of the free ad-supported streaming TV like Pluto and Tubi and the Roku channel, and then all these niche players too, like Acorn and Crunchyroll. And so we're at a point now where there's more and better programming on streaming for less money than there is on linear, and we think that people are going to start making that move and watching a lot more CTV than they even have in previous years. Although at the same time, that linear audience is not moving because nothing in TV ever moves all that quickly. But anyway, the reasons that beyond wide audience reach was that there were sophisticated targeting capabilities, which is huge. You get that addressable element on CTV. It's baked into it. And then the third reason, which is also really key, is that you have lighter ad loads, and they help keep the audience engaged. If you've ever sort of been watching streaming for a long time and then switch back to linear, you really notice, my God, was that what I was putting up with for all those years? So it is a big thing. Some of the sort of flags that people had about why, and that's in that sort of second column there, which I'm pointing to, but you can't see me point to it. Some of them are reluctant to get on board because they thought CTV was too expensive. And this is true. The CPMs are definitely higher because you're getting a tighter audience. 28% thought it was too difficult to measure. That's also, there's a lot of validity to that. We've been seeing new sort of solutions coming out from companies like iSpot and Nielsen to sort of help make that a lot easier. And 27% said it's too hard to buy at scale. And Paul's going to talk to how Cadent may be helping with that one. And anyway, nevertheless, CTV is a sea change. 60% of them thought that their budget was going to go up, and their CTV expenditures would go up over the next year. And really critical, 72% of them thought that CTV is going to be a very important way to reach audiences over the next 2 to 5 years. Final thing, and then I'm going to sort of turn it over to let Paul do some talking here, is that addressable advertising, which is targeted at, you've also heard it called audience-based advertising, where you're looking at who the viewer is and you're sort of targeting at a specific audience, that that's something that 64% of them expected to see an increase in that in the next 2 to 4 years. And what's exciting about addressable is that it's now available in a bigger way on linear, and it's always available on streaming. So Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and you can.
Yeah, I guess we could get started. So first, thank you for that intro and the overview. I mean, it was fun to do this research with you. It was funny when you started. You said a bunch. We had like over 15,000 responses to this project, which was great. And what was interesting about it is we did this research at a time last summer, right, where a lot was in flux. And so what I thought was funny about this is, the title of today is The Future of TV, but what you just showed is a snapshot of right now. Right. And while everyone wants to know where things are going, I think what's really important for our discussion today and for talking about this research is to talk about right now. And, being a CMO myself, right now in the state of marketing, how CMOs should be viewing TV as part of their overall marketing mix. So a couple thought starters, and then we can get through the discussion on this. Is, you as interesting the way you phrased it, Alan, before, like, we think that there's a shift, but nothing ever moves quickly in TV. I think what's important to realize as a marketer is the delivery mechanism of television content may be changing. It may be going from a cable and a cable box to a phone and an Ethernet cable or Wi-Fi or 5G or something, but the content itself does not, right? The content, professionally produced content that are TV episodes is not changing. It's just shifting where it's being viewed. And I think that's important for us to realize. It's not that one delivery mechanism, linear, is better or worse than IP or anything else, but the delivery mechanism is changing. And the corollary to that is what we're seeing is more viewers of TV choosing their own adventure rather than sitting down and being entertained. But both of those experiences are really important. And if you're a marketer, you have to understand that. And what I mean by that is this is the on-demand viewer, right? I have a son, he doesn't go to sleep. He's on spring break this week. He doesn't go to sleep till 8. My wife and I wanted to watch the end of a show. We didn't start it till 9:22 at night because that was when bedtime was. And that's fine. We're an on-demand viewer at that moment. And I'm valuable to an advertiser because I committed to watching this episode. And so my attention during the episode of the TV show is absolutely important for me in an on-demand world.
Right.
But similarly, we have a friend, it's actually a couple of years ago, but I love this story. And she absolutely loved the TV show Scandal. Just was hooked on it. And would, on Facebook, while she was watching the episode live, post these, oh no, I can't believe that happened, right? And that co-viewing experience, we didn't watch Scandal all the time, but sometimes we look at our phones and go, oh, I got to see what Kalia's doing. And we'd like tune into the show. And that live TV experience is still important to an advertiser because it creates that shared community and that aggregation of audience in a way that on-demand doesn't. And so I think that's really important as we start this conversation to think about is what's changing in TV and what does the future look like is, in yesteryear, my cable guy maybe put a cable in my wall, and that's how I got TV. And tomorrow, maybe I'm renting a 5G piece of equipment in order to do that. But the on-demand and live experiences are super important to marketers. And I think as we go through this, we'll talk about this. The second piece, though, is how are those live and on-demand experiences and the way that content is delivered important to marketers? It always goes back to the ROI equation. I think as we get through this conversation, we're going to talk a bit about measurement and ROI. And I was listening to the intro video, and everyone was talking about it. I wrote down, it was Carter Cranford from Verizon. She said, our consumer experiences have grown exponentially, right? There are a ton of experiences that marketers are creating now to try to engage consumers across a bunch of different devices. Some of them have TV content, some of them are email, some of them are other things, in-person experiences. But the thing that ties it all together is the ROI equation. And what's interesting is TV can come back to that. TV is starting to, with CTV and the blending of audiences, really become a major factor in true KPI or an ROI equations that's there. But the third piece of it is, and I think this is what our survey uncovered, to kind of give it back to you, is marketers, given our responsibility to engage our consumers, right? The other thing I wrote down, I love that it's all B2C, my B is your B. That was Fernando on the end. I love that quote, right? And it's the path of least resistance. If it's complicated, if something is not packaged correctly, if I've got to spend too much time in one channel, and like one channel that could be, you know, CTV versus linear, or that could be TV versus digital. If I got to spend too much time tinkering to try to equate one channel to the other, I can't make my ROI calculation, and it's not worth my time, right? I have to keep my business moving forward. And so I think, you know, my three takeaways and, you know, kind of headline what we're going to talk about today is that path of least resistance for CTV, you know, is improving, right? But there are still some major questions that marketers have about the efficacy and the use cases for CTV as part of their overall media mix, and then as part of the overall marketing mix, that still need to be addressed. And I think we should talk more about that. And you mentioned terminology, which might be a good place to start, as well. Just, you know, what the heck is this? But framing this correctly and understanding that, you know, if we don't get the packaging right, if we don't make it easier for marketers to equate this, you know, a newer medium of CTV with some of the older, more established ones in terms of what is it delivering to my business? You know, I just want to sell another case of apple juice kind of thing, right? That's all I want. None of this matters, right? And the media guys and all the launches of all the big flixes, as you talked about, they don't matter at all, because we're not going to spend there as marketers, because I don't know what it's actually delivering for me.
No, this is very true. And, you know, we're pretty certain that one of the reasons for a lot of the confusion with terminology is you sort of have, you know, half the people who are doing this come at it from a digital, you know, started off in digital, the other half started off in TV. And while there is starting to be this sort of, you know, hybrid element at both brands and agencies, it's not there yet. And you see it in little things. Like, one of my favorite stories about this is, you know, that people who come from the digital end often refer to TV networks as publishers. And people who work at TV networks are always like, why are they talking about the New York Times and Condé Nast?
Right.
Like, what does that have to do with us? And, you know, and that's like, you know, it's a little term, but it's like, no, they, you know, and you sort of have to explain, no, they actually refer to themselves as networks or programmers if you want to get fancy, but they don't really, you know, publisher is just throws them. And especially as we, you know, as we move into this world, if you were coming from TV, you didn't really, you know, you knew Nielsen, you knew GRPs or certain terms, and then suddenly you're confronted with things like SSP and, you know, DSP and, you know, and all these hundreds of acronyms, and it's, you know, it's really confusing. And then also, if you're coming from TV, it was pretty simple. You bought on day parts, you based it on GRPs, and you push the button, and that was it. And now suddenly you've got all these walled gardens. You've got people offering different, you know, using different definitions for different terms, things that don't make sense. You know, audience definition is a huge one. Like, you know, if I want to, you know, OpenAP has been doing, you know, great work trying to sort of standardize, just even if I want to reach new moms. Well, is a new mom someone with a 6-month-old, a 3-year-old? Where, you know, where's the line? And if everybody has a different definition, it becomes really hard to plan all of that stuff.
It is. And I think, you know, that goes back to, you know, my comment about path of least resistance. You know, I think what's interesting about, or what we need to think about with common terms, common definitions and all that, is that it's not going to be there. You know, I think sometimes in the industry, we tend to talk about it's the us versus them. The digital guys want this and the TV guys have this, and TV's been doing it this way for 60 years, and Nielsen and GRP and digital's been doing this, and look at the success of Google and Facebook. And you know what, like, as a marketer, my job is to find my customer, and having some artificial war about the digital guys versus the TV guys doesn't help me find my customer, because that's my job. My boss wants me to find my customer, right? And my boss wants me to figure out where my customer is going. Right. And so I think what's, you know, when you get to terminology, some of the things that I would say is, as a marketer, that's on you, right? As a CMO, that's on you in your business to define the KPI and to use your spend and to use your, you know, your internal data and resources to define what you're looking for, and then work with the partners that are going to be flexible enough to help you get that, right? Because otherwise what happens is you are going to get caught down the path of how many SSPs do I need? Or, is this data segment good enough? Or should I find one that maybe costs me, a fraction of a penny less, but maybe gives me a little better ROI, but maybe the drop off on the segment sync isn't, you wind up getting caught down this rat hole that I think is not productive in a way. And so it's important, right? Knowing what questions to ask and getting that, you use this phrase when we were talking prior, right? The technical consistency. That's not on your suppliers. That's on you to know what questions to ask as a marketer. That's for you to say, these are the 5 things I need to know. How fresh is your data? How do you define this? And to make sure that partner is aligning with you and your team and the way your team is growing.
Right, and not to be afraid to ask if you don't understand something. In other words, that seems to be a big thing. People are afraid of seeming dumb, of not seeming not with it. But nobody, with the range of definitions, it's really a smart thing to go, okay, what exactly do you mean by this? How are you defining even something big? How are you defining CTV? What am I actually paying for?
Right.
Getting all that down so you know what you're going in with.
And one of the reasons we found in the survey that marketers are excited about CTV advertising is just that, right? CTV brings a consistency into the marketing department, right? Because now I've got a segment that I've defined. These are my loyalists, or these are my, my intenders and where they are. And I can find them in my email programs, I can find them in my digital programs, I can find them in my CTV programs. And then if you use a company like Cadent, we can find them on your linear TV media as well and tie that thing together. And so now, it gives you as a marketer more control over how you see your customer or your prospects and how you're interacting with them. And I think that's one thing that traditional television hasn't been able to deliver at scale until the rise of CTV. Is that ability for a marketer to push their own audience segment down, right? But otherwise, we were living in a world of age and gender and defined, cohorts by the networks or by Nielsen. And so now a marketer can say, I'm going to target pizza lovers, and I define a pizza lover as this, and it doesn't include pineapple, because if they put pineapple on their pizza, they don't love pizza, or whatever that is. A marketer can find that, and that asking the questions are important. But I think what CTV brings to the mix is that ability to give the marketing department a bit more control over both the buying and then the measurement of all of their TV, and then that consistency across the other platforms.
Right. And not only can you define your segment, you can actually bring your segment. You can say, hey, we've got this loyalty program. We've got, all these email addresses, and with the CTV, you can actually match it up and go, okay, we did reach X number of people who were in your loyalty program.
Yeah, one of the last year was an interesting year for all marketing. One of the best experiences I can tell you I've had is we bought a company named 4Info, which made a device graph and came with partnerships with DMPs. So we started working, Cadent for the first time, started working with marketers that had their own segments and their own data management platforms that wanted to bring them into TV. And what was really interesting is, I think after we all got through March and in April and understood that, all right, we're going to have to rethink all of our marketing programs for the rest of the summer, is we saw a lot of rise of use of audience data from the marketer, from the advertiser, being pushed into TV universes that hadn't happened before. We saw a lot more use of those audiences for index TV as well as for CTV. And my career, I was a brand marketer at an agency, and then at Motorola for a while, and then started spending marketing. I started marketing to marketers themselves at a company named Turn, which is a DSP. So I was on the digital side. Now I've come over to TV. That was the first time I really saw the worlds melding, right? Because the conversation turned to, where's my audience, and not broadcast TV is antiquated, and so I got to go find the new thing. It was way more about let me define this segment, let me push it to the places.
Right. No, that is a Fascinating piece. I mean, the other thing that that we learned through this, through the sort of the research that we did, is that there's still some fear about the cost of CTV, right? That seemed to be one of the bigger things that people were sort of pushing back on because the CPMS are so much higher. And I think it's a matter of, of sort of one, it's just a shock value because it is a lot higher, but two, it's sort of this education of understanding like when you're reaching the exact people that you want to reach, that's worth a lot more. And you're reaching them, when they're watching a show, as opposed to you just sort of, hitting at, okay, a lot of people who are in your target watch this show, but maybe not today. And sort of explaining that value proposition a lot better.
Yeah, yeah, in the conversations we had over the summers, we were doing that, and we were doing this before with addressable set-top advertising. Was a lot more about the in target, right? And I think what happens is if you look at traditional linear TV and then are able to do an analysis of what was in target, of what you reached, we all know that you find a lot of out of target, right? Which lowers the CPM on a per unit basis, but doesn't actively effectively move your marketing campaign forward, right? Some of the dollars in your traditional linear TV campaign work harder because they're working against an audience that actually is in target. When you start looking at an in target CPM and then looking at the cost of CTV or addressable, you find out actually, the costs and the benefits, right? The ROI equation that comes from that are actually not only quite comparable, but in a lot of ways quite better, right? Because not only can you measure more, you can optimize more frequently in some of the newer mediums than you can in linear television. It's just the way the systems work. But I think the most important thing though is you need both, right? I spent 6 years in a digital DSP, and we talked a lot about the lower funnel. And it's like, look, you ain't getting to the lower funnel if you're not coming in at the top of the funnel, right? And I think what's important about TV, to know about TV, is TV can do that top of funnel better than a lot of the digital properties, but it can also address different constituencies now throughout the funnel with different use cases and types. Two things. I see we got a question here. Do we consider linear broadcast running on connected TVs like Samsung or Vizio CTV? So yes, I would consider those because those devices are listening to the broadcasts. And then in a lot of instances, depending on how the user has it configured, you can do addressable ad insertion, kind of overlaying and those natural breaks. And so, yes, we would consider those there. And I think another question we got, which is relevant to this, is do we think audience-based buying will finally be relevant this year during upfronts and beyond, or are we not there yet? Which I think is the other piece of this. And that's kind of what we're saying, Alan, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, audience-based buying should be relevant to marketing departments all the time right now, right? Because if you're not actually identifying and segmenting your customer, which I'm sure you're doing in your other marketing, and your other channels on marketing, you have to have a view in it to TV. I think the question, what I would rephrase that question and say, do we think the capabilities to have unified audience-based buying across TV will make it into the upfronts and beyond? And that absolutely, I can say yes. At Cadent, we're doing it with our customers today, right? Take the one audience definition and not just CTV and digital, but cable and broadcast, and bring that together with a single audience, so that a marketer has a way better view of the efficacy of that spend.
Yeah, definitely. And you're starting to hear people ask for it too, sort of, right. As opposed to sort of, it being an option that was out there. Now brands are saying, we want this. We want to be able to do this because this is important, and we've been doing it. One of the things the pandemic did was really make clear the benefits of being able to target ads, because you had a lot of the situation they used to call, I think heard it called a lot, the hammer and the dance, where a lot of times places would open up and then shut down very quickly. And if you're an advertiser, you had to sort of figure out, okay, I can't send this ad to this state because this market, because they're closed, but I can send it to the other market. So, the geolocation is a huge part of addressable too.
Yeah, and I see Lauren creeping back, so we're probably gonna, I think she's gonna tell us to stop. But what I would say is, that's great, geolocation. I will also remind you in TV that geolocation has been around for almost 100 years, since the dawn of TV, with local broadcast. And so again, my point to a marketer is, you've got to use the right medium for the right tool. And yes, you can spend a lot on geolocation data to, isolate Poughkeepsie, New York, or you could buy the broadcast station in Poughkeepsie, New York on the same audience definition. And you know, depending on your cost and your marketing objective, one may be better than the other. And so, you know, I'll you know, kind of conclude my story by just saying, you got to look at TV differently, right? TV is about professionally produced content with the ability to target by